He walked over to the table and began taking out paper and a brush. He started writing something with the brush, as his expression was both intense and swift. Now he wanted to come up with a really interesting imperial edict. Zhao Shu had never seen such a terrifying expression on Tuye's face before, and she started to feel scared of him. Tuye's face became more intense with every moment, his teeth clenched, and his breathing quickened. Zhao Shu thought that this time he was definitely preparing to take action against her adoptive father. But the truth wasn't that serious. Tuye was struggling to write with the brush, because he is using it for the first time. It was agonizing his eyes, as it was turning red. He cursed inwardly, damn it, writing with a brush is really hard. He stopped writing the imperial edict, and sighed. Zhao Shu also thought that her days were numbered. Unexpectedly Tuye turned to her, and said, Zhao Shu, help me write this. Zhao Shu was surprised. Before she could understand, Tuye grabbed her hand, and pulled her to the chair. Seeing Tuye's insistence, Zhao Shu had no choice but to comply, and asked, I don't know what decree your majesty wants to write. Tuye leaned close to her ear and whispered, write, that all descendants of the Tu family including Tu Su, are to have their surname removed and be demoted to commoners. Zhao Shu was terrified, sweat started pouring down like rain. She thought to herself, what does His Majesty mean by abolishing all his relatives? I don't understand. She hesitated to write, and softly asked, Your Majesty, if I may be bold to ask, why do you want me to write such a decree? In fact, earlier, he asked the downfall system. The influence of the Tu royal clan was the simplest way to reduce the current points. He thought, turning the Tu clan's descendants into commoners not only reduces points but also creates an image of a brutal tyrant for himself. To the outside world, this plan was truly perfect. When coming up with this plan, Tuye even praised himself to think of such a method, and say, it truly makes me a genius among tyrants. When Zhao Shu asked the reason, he put on a cold face. Why are you asking me? Zhao Shu saw Tuye's expression, and fearfully lowered her head. She stammered and apologized, it's my fault for speaking out of turn, please forgive me, Your Majesty. Tuye gave a mysterious smile, and whispered, of course, it's to make the game more challenging. He reached out and caressed Zhao Shu's beautiful face, continuing, with this decree not only will I become an isolated person without my family's support, but I'll also be branded a cold-blooded tyrant. That's why I had you write the decree. You should tell Zhao Zhuo this good news, he will surely be delighted. And say, won't you consider this intelligence as a gift from me? Every word Tuye said, Zhao Shu listened closely, and suddenly a thought flashed in her mind. A gift from me? I've never received a gift in my life. She knew clearly that His Majesty was deceiving her, but why was I so happy about it? After helping Tuye finish writing the decree, Zhao Shu went to Zhao Zhuo's residence. She walks alone in silence, stands at the door and knocks gently. Zhao Zhuo steps out to open the door, and upon seeing Zhao Shu, he irritably asks, why are you just arriving now? Zhao Shu enters the room and says, this time I came, bringing important intelligence. She slowly says each word Tuye issued. A decree to demote the entire royal family to commoners. Zhao Zhuo is shocked, and can't believe his ears. Li Tianyuan is also very shocked after hearing the news. It seems both of them never thought something like this would happen. Zhao Zhuo, full of concern, says, old Li Tianyuan, you just plan to establish a new king among the descendants of the royal family. But that brat is obviously targeting us. Li Tianyuan doesn't respond to Zhao Zhuo. Instead he turns to ask Zhao Shu, how did you know such important intelligence? Is it reliable? Zhao Shu stammered and responded, Your Majesty wanted me to personally write this imperial decree. Zhao Zhuo was shocked, his eyes widened bloodshot. He suddenly rushed forward, delivering a thunderous slap to his adopted child's face, cursing, it's you who revealed our secret. Zhao Shu clutched her stinging face, tears streaming down desperately, denying, Godfather, Zhao Shu didn't. Zhao Zhuo angrily pointed at her, shouting, don't act in front of me. If you didn't infatuated with that fair-faced man, and didn't help him against us, how could he let you write the decree? As he was about to strike again, Zhao Zhuo was stopped by Li Tianyuan. He patted Zhao Zhuo's shoulder, and said, Lord Zhao Zhuo, calm down. If Zhao Shu had leaked it, how could we have known about the decree being issued? This is Tuye's scheme to remind us not to act rashly in establishing a new ruler. Zhao Zhuo angrily looked at Zhao Shu, his eyes clearly full of defiance. But after hearing Li Tianyuan's explanation, he couldn't think of any other reason. Lowering his voice, he approached and helped his foster daughter Zhao Shu stand up, trying to appear concerned. As he said, Zhao Shu, just now your godfather wrongly accused you. You won't hold it against me, won't you? Zhao Shu replied, I wouldn't dare. Zhao Zhuo let out a sigh, and said to Li Tianyuan, Old Li, it seems your plan to establish a new monarch has no place to play out. Let's stick with my strategy. I'll incite the ministers on his first day in court. I'll do my best to humiliate him in front of everyone, let him know who really holds power in this court. Li Tianyuan wasn't very enthusiastic about Zhao Zhuo's plan. If not outright, thinking it was childish. He hesitated and said, Lord Zhao Zhuo, I feel your plan is a bit. Li Tianyuan was about to dismiss Zhao Zhuo's plan, but he couldn't find any reason or alternative plan to offer, so he said nothing. Further, after all, in Li Tianyuan's mind, Zhao Zhuo was never someone who could accomplish great things. He no longer opposed Zhao Zhuo's plan, but silently devised his own scheme, leaving Zhao Zhuo's residence. We return to the imperial palace. Tuyi is sitting in his room. He brings his imperial decree. It's ready, now just waiting for the right time to announce it. Although it's still far from reducing the points to 0. He rests his chin on his hand thinking, if I think carefully there should be quite a few ways to reduce the national power points. Digging deep into his limited knowledge, Tuyi comes up with an idea. Right. Those tyrant kings in history, aside from keeping close to their treacherous officials, they ignored state affairs forcibly, took common women's, filled their harem, and so on. Those are the most despised acts of tyrant kings. He thinks, the late emperor's bones are not yet cold, and I'm already issuing a decree to forcibly take the women of all the court officials into the palace. This will absolutely break their hearts. This way not only can I reduce a large amount of points, but I can also gain some benefits for myself. Truly I am brilliant to think of such a wicked plan. As he thinks, Tuya's face twists into a vile grin, making the eunuch beside him afraid that he might turn and bite him. Tuyi loudly commands, I want to summon Zhao Zhuo and Li Tianyuan. After some time Zhao Zhuo and Li Tianyuan hurry to the imperial palace, heading together to the emperor's study. When Tuyi sees the two, he beams with joy, eagerly welcoming them. My dear subjects, no need for formality, please sit, make yourselves at home. Zhao Zhuo lifted his chin, not bothering to bow to Tuyi. He just quietly hummed, and found a seat, while Li Tianyuan, still knowing his place, bowed and thanked his majesty. After Li Tianyuan sat down, he put on an annoyed expression, and said to Tuyi, I say your majesty, now that you've ascended the throne shouldn't you attend court tomorrow to get acquainted? It sounded like Zhao Zhuo was concerned about state affairs, but inside he was secretly laughing. I'll go negotiate with the Zhao faction ministers later tomorrow, we must unite and make you lose face. After hearing Zhao Zhuo's words, Tuyi thought to himself, the state affairs should be a point-earning matter, right? I'd be a fool to attend court, right after ascending the throne. Of course, to reduce points, Tuyi would create the image of a lazy tyrant. He stretched lazily and replied, attending court is such a hassle. I've just ascended the throne, and don't have any experience in any case. I trust you. I'll leave the affairs of the court to you. Li Tianyuan had expected this response. He thought to himself, as expected, His Majesty refused Zhao Zhuo's request for him to attend court. Not only did he predict that Zhao Zhuo wanted to suppress him at court, but he also used the excuse of trusting his ministers. Leaving others with no room to argue, Zhao Zhuo's crude plot was completely disregarded by him. Tuyi thought it was time to implement his plan to reduce points by expanding the harem, so he spoke to the other two. Ahem, let's set aside the court affairs. For now, the real reason I called you here today is to discuss something. He put on a greedy expression and continued. I am now the emperor, yet the harem only has Zhao Shu. Honestly, it's a bit embarrassing, so I've decided to search for beauties to fill the harem. Zhao Zhuo was shocked, thinking the late emperor has just been buried, and he's already thinking about his lower half. I've never seen someone so shameless. Li Tianyuan was also quite surprised. He didn't think Tuyi would specifically summon the two of them, just to discuss something unrelated to state affairs. He couldn't figure out what kind of strategy this harem expansion was. But Tuyi didn't stop there, he urged them to hurry up, hoping to quickly bring the national power points down to 0. The two old men were silent, still a bit bewildered by Tuyi's sudden intention. After a long while, Zhao Zhuo wiped the sweat off his face, and said, Your Majesty wants us to search for the beauties of the world? And I support that, but the time is pressing. Tuyi didn't let him finish, he immediately interrupted. I understand in this urgent situation, we can't find the world's beauties. So let's search within the capital. Hearing this, Zhao Zhuo was shocked, and thought that Tuyi was so impatient that he couldn't wait any longer, and had to find women within the country. Li Tianyuan wasn't as easily convinced by Tuyi. He silently reminded himself, Li Tianyuan, don't let His Majesty use the search for beauties as a ruse to fool yourself. He just mentioned the capital, that might be the real focus. Not done with his plan, Tuyi continued. I've thought of a way to save time and effort. We can choose from the daughters of the court officials. This statement made Li Tianyuan whiten his eyes. He certainly hadn't considered this idea. After discussing the matter of adding more women to the harem, Tuyi dismissed the two of them. On the way back, Zhao said to Li Tianyuan that Tuyi doesn't care about state affairs and is recruiting for the harem. This is clearly the behavior of a foolish ruler. This kid is digging his own grave from the emperor's position, which saves us a lot of effort. Li Tianyuan hadn't responded to Zhao Zhua's words so far, but hearing the old man nagging endlessly, he had to stop. Li Tianyuan shouted at Zhao Zhua, "Enough, if you continue to underestimate his majesty, the fate that awaits us will be the extermination of our entire clan." Zhao Zhua obviously didn't understand Li Tianyuan's meaning, judging by his dumbfounded expression just now. Li Tianyuan had raised his voice in anger. He quickly looked around to see if anyone nearby might have heard. Realizing he had spoken too loudly, he softly apologized to Zhao Zhua. "Sorry, Lord Zhao Zhua, I lost my temper earlier, but His Majesty's actions are all part of a grand, deeply meaningful plan." Zhao Zhua asked blankly, "A grand plan? How come I can't see it?" Li Tianyuan replied in a deep voice, "You just made a plan to humiliate him in court." But he easily dismissed it, proving that he knows our intentions like the back of his hand. Zhao Zhua said in confusion, "But that plan was just decided, and we were summoned to the palace immediately. There's no way the information could have leaked out." Li Tianyuan, with eyes full of depth, replied, "This proves that he anticipated it. This is what's truly terrifying. Not only that, besides avoiding court sessions, he's also recruiting women into his harem. These actions seem indulgent, but they're aimed at us. A chain of strategies forming a unified whole for the two old men." After hearing Li Tianyuan's analysis, Zhao Zhua also started feeling uneasy, but still didn't understand. He asked again, "A chain of strategies? What do you mean?" Li Tianyuan replied confidently, "He doesn't need to attend court, because he's confident that he can control the government without doing so." Li Tianyuan's expression suddenly changed. He continued, "Because by bringing the female relatives of officials into the harem, he can, through marriage alliances, directly win over the ministers and undermine our influence in the court." Indeed, Li Tianyuan's analysis was very reasonable. After hearing it, Zhao Zhua was also frightened. He muttered, Then what do we do now?" Li Tianyuan began to formulate a plan in his heart. He smiled mysteriously and replied, "What else can we do now? He is the emperor. It's only natural to ensure the continuation of the royal bloodline." After saying that, he turned to look away from Zhao Zhua. His gaze at that moment suggested that he had to come up with a plan of his own to counter Tuyi. He said, "We are his subjects, of course we must also ensure his satisfaction." A few days later at the Emperor Palace, Li Tianyuan had returned to the palace to report, "Your Majesty, a few days ago, as per your instructions, all descendants of the Tu clan have been reduced to commoners, except for the eldest Prince Tu Su, who is stationed outside. The decree has yet to reach him." Tuyi waved his hand and replied, "Those matters are not important, we can discuss them later." He then shifted the topic to his harem and asked, "Have you already made the selections for the harem?" Li Tianyuan bowed and replied, "Your servant did not neglect the duty, but the time was short. I beg your majesty for forgiveness." After finishing his words, he clapped his hands to signal, "Everyone come out here for his majesty to see." Tuyi seemed very pleased with Li Tianyuan's preparations. His face flushed with excitement. In front of him was a lineup of beauties, each not only beautiful but also perfectly shaped. Tuyi's eyes sparkled like stars as he looked at the women's, unable to stop himself from thinking, "Is this the paradise of ultimate bliss?" The group quickly lined up neatly in front of Tuyi, then bowed one by one. "Your servant greets your majesty." Tuyi hurriedly wiped away the drool, scratching his head awkwardly and telling them to rise. Tuyi walked over to Li Tianyuan, leaned close to his ear, and whispered, "My dear advisor, among the beauties you've recruited this time, is there anyone particularly skilled?" Li Tianyuan asked in confusion, "I don't quite understand what your majesty means by particularly skilled." Tuyi pouted and thought to himself, "This old man Li Tianyuan is pretending to be upright." Even if he hadn't heard of such skills before, as a man shouldn't he at least grasp the idea from the context? He was referring to someone who knows many unique positions, but Li Tianyuan thought, Tuyi is being suspicious. The concubines Li Tianyuan brought were mostly selected from noble women without significant power. On the surface everything seemed reasonable. without any issues except for two women, Fan Taozhu and Zhuge Xia, were somewhat special. More than 10 years ago, two prestigious families of Qian dynasty, the Fan family and the Zhuge family, angered the former emperor, and were executed at that time. Li Tianyuan was in charge of the execution. Moved by compassion, he secretly saved these two children over the past 10 years. He concealed their identities, and raised them by his side. Unexpectedly they inherited the talents of their families, and became important pawns in his hands. Recalling the night before sending them into the palace, Li Tianyuan summoned them to his private room. He told them Fan Taozhu and Zhuge, the Qian emperor who killed your families is dead. But you can't personally take revenge, are you willing to accept that? Of course, this blow from Li Tianyuan hit the weak spot of the two girls, immediately stirring up their hatred. He also said, now there is an opportunity to destroy the city right before you, but this is extremely dangerous. The new emperor Tu Yi is not only deeply scheming, but also cruel and tyrannical, even more so than Tu Qianjun. You could say, it's a matter of life. And upon hearing this, Fan Taozhu was not afraid, but instead felt a surge of extreme resentment. In her heart, she replied, as long as I can take revenge, I will not fear death. Zhuge beside her also loudly responded, I has long been ready to sacrifice myself. The spirit of these two girls was exactly what Li Tianyuan wanted. He took advantage of the right moment, during this selection of concubines, arranging for the two to be placed by Tu Ye's side. Without anyone noticing, after a period of observation, Tu Ye's eyes brightened, as headlights fell upon the two beautiful sisters, none other than Fan Taozhu and Zhuge. Tu Ye's special attention to the two girls made Li Tianyuan anxious, fearing his spies had been noticed. As soon as they were seen, Tu Yi used the downfall system to check the information on the two girls. First was Zhuge Xia, daughter of the great magician. Zhuge Xia, the granddaughter of the prominent scholar Zhuge Tiangang, during the reign of Emperor Qianjun. She is the sole survivor of the Zhuge family, after they were exterminated by Emperor Qianjun. Adopted by Li Tianyuan, she approached the host to seek revenge and destroy the country. The respective stats are political power 32, Machiavellianism 90, martial prowess 20, conquest 35, sorcery 83, rebellion 96. The second person is Fan Taozhu, the granddaughter of the wealthy merchant Fan Shuiyan. During the reign of Emperor Qianjun, she is the only survivor of the Fan family, after they were exterminated by Emperor Qianjun. Adopted by Li Tianyuan, she approached the host to seek revenge and destroy the nation. The respective stats are political power 37, Machiavellianism 96, martial prowess 82, conquest 66, sorcery 26, rebellion 66. After reading the information about the two beautiful women, Tu Yi realized that these two ladies were actually spies planted by Li Tianyuan. He nodded in approval, very good. Venomous beauties causing chaos in the harem perfectly match his standard, as a tyrant who would ruin the nation. He pretended not to know anything, and approached the two women. He probed the two ladies, what are your names? Fan Taozhu answered first. Your Majesty, the servant's name is Zhu. Zhuge also followed with the name Xia. Tu Yi glanced at Zhuge Xia, and said, Lady Xia, you seem very tense. Li Tianyuan was inwardly terrified, this is bad. Zhuge has an introverted personality, under Tu Ye's oppressive aura she might slip up. Seeing that Zhuge didn't respond, Tu Yi gently lifted her chin and whispered, there's no need to be afraid, I'm really quite approachable. After saying that, he smiled like a true scoundrel. Unexpectedly Zhuge's face suddenly flushed tears, and snot started flowing. The downfall system announced, an unrecorded hidden attribute of Zhuge Xia's identity is unknown to others and has not been recorded in the system's hidden attributes. In Zhuge's emotional tension, being touched by the opposite sex in sensitive areas, not limited to the chin, will cause her to faint due to embarrassment. Fan Taozhu felt extremely tense, seeing his companion faint. Tu Yi was also shocked, after hearing the Downy's announcement. He never thought someone could faint from sheer embarrassment, just by having their chin touch slightly. Li Tianyuan was utterly terrified upon witnessing this. Tu Yi's anxiety grew stronger, as he clearly intended to show affection to her, to reassure Li Tianyuan. But Zhuge's low tolerance ruined the performance he had prepared. Zhuge lay on the ground with her eyes rolled back, uncertain when she would wake up. In this situation, Li Tianyuan would fear her identity being exposed, and would certainly seek to withdraw her. Just as Tu Yi feared, after seeing Zhuge faint, Li Tianyuan hurriedly knelt down to confess saying, Your Majesty, it was my negligence and supervision, choosing an unsuitable person. This woman has disgraced herself before your Majesty. This humble servant deserves death. This old man will take Zhuge away. Tu Yi hastily shouted, no need. In his plan, he need both of these women to create chaos in the harem. So this play must continue even if it look reluctantly, in front of everyone. Tu Yi lifted Zhuge up, and said, I like the type that can't resist teasing like this. Li Tianyuan, your choice truly pleases me. Then Fan Taozhu couldn't help but curse, after hearing Tuye's words. This tyrant is indeed a pervert. Seeing that Tuye was still fond of Zhuge, Li Tianyuan finally breathed a sigh of relief, wiping the sweat on his forehead, and said, Thank you, your majesty. Tuye was about to carry Zhuge back to the study, as he announced to everyone, I've decided tonight Miss Zhuge will attend to me. Fan Taozhu rolled her eyes, thinking, Tyrant, you will pay for this sooner or later. Fan Taozhu's strange gaze startled Tuye, making him turn back to look. He wondered, why are you looking at me with such dissatisfaction? Tuye's eyes turned sinister. Could it be that Miss Fan Taozhu also wants to attend me? And say, then let's play three-person landlords tonight instead.